important, and I'm glad you're all there with it.
Right, right. Nice.
Live streaming has started.
Yes.
Who goes first? Mitashi, will you?
So I give the program, Mr. Hariharan. As we start, I'll give a quick roundup of the program.
Sure, sure.
We can start now, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the webinar that we are doing today on enabling thermal comfort in mass housing. This is a critical issue, and there are many linkages that you will hear of today from my colleague Anumita, I know, and Rajneesh. But for us at CSE, we come at this on three big issues. One, obviously the issue of thermal comfort is important. We need to make sure that everybody, the rich and the poor in India, have thermal comfort, which means that their houses are both cool in summer and heated in winter. We cannot have a differential to work between the rich and the poor when it comes to thermal comfort. It also means that if we have good technologies for thermal comfort, and we do our buildings in a way that we can actually make sure that we build for thermal comfort, we reduce the demand on energy and on appliances. So if you do the building right and you build green, then you make sure that you actually reduce the demand for energy, which has its own implications when it comes to climate change, when it comes to pollution from thermal power plants. So reducing the need for energy is the second part of the agenda. The third part of the agenda is very clear that it needs to be affordable, and it needs to make sure that it is available to all. And that's why my colleagues, and we're very delighted to have with us a very interesting panel to discuss this. But CSE's focus is really on affordable housing, on mass housing, because we can do thermal comfort at huge cost in the houses that we build for the rich. But we need to make sure that that same technology, the same ways of being able to manage thermal comfort is extended so that it is there for houses which are being built on a mass scale. And the government of India today has an enormously big program and a very welcome program to reach houses to large numbers of people. Now, as we are reaching those houses to large numbers of people, the issue of thermal comfort and designing houses for mass housing in a way that we can make sure those technologies, those techniques are incorporated is critical. That's third. The fourth part of it is really why now? Why at the time of COVID should we worry about this? Because at some level, COVID has brought to us a very clear realization that we will have to build cities for livability in the future. If we divide our cities between the cities for the rich and the cities for the poor, you will always have a very high burden of diseases. And that's what we have seen today. Congested environments, lack of water, lack of ventilation adds to the disease burden. But it also means that with COVID, there's going to be a change in the new normal, and people are going to be working more from home, and there is going to be more need for livability, which means that people will need both green spaces and will need thermal comfort. So there's a lot of different aspects to this work, and that's really why we thought we should put this together, and my colleague Anumita will explain this much better than I have to you as she sets the context of it. And we hope with our panel today, we will come up with an agenda for change. So what's the panel and the agenda for today? Let me give you a quick update on that. Anumita will set the scene. We then have Amrit Abhijat, who is the Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, who will give us a good idea in terms of the policy framework for promoting thermal comfort in mass housing and how the government of India is actually taking these challenges on board. And that's really a very welcome step to move ahead. We then have a panel where my colleague Rajneesh will speak about the resource efficiency, what we have done recently in a study that we have produced. We have Dr. Shailesh Agarwal, who's the Executive Director of the Building Material and Technology Promotion Council. We have Dr. Rajan Raval, who's the Executive Director, Center for Advanced Research in Building Science and Energy at the CEPT University. We then have Hariharan Chandrasekhar, who's the foundation of All Technology Foundation, and then Mr. Nagraj from HUDCO. And each one of them are going to touch upon the aspects to build that agenda for the future. As you can see, it's a very rich and a full workshop that we have in front of us. I have the unenviable task to keep time, and I will try and do my best in that. So let me immediately ask my colleague Anumita to start and to set the scene on why is CSC doing this work and what is our agenda.
Thank you, Sunita. So let me first share my screen and sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Sunita. That exactly is the agenda for today's conversation, that how do we understand the agenda for the new normal? And before that, how do we understand this inflection point, that what is the legacy from pre-COVID times and where are we today? What we are discussing overall, the whole idea of green building, policy roots are already there. It's over the decade-old experience that we already have in front of us. So the policies began with the whole full focus on energy efficiency. So we have come up with a plethora of these rules with ECBC, ECBCR, energy labeling of appliances is all out there. We have the whole big agenda that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has rolled out on affordable housing, and Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is the Housing for All program, which has now taken shape and is moving forward. And just before the pandemic, just a year ago, when we saw this very strategic shift in focus from energy efficiency to the whole idea of thermal comfort for all. And that's because India's Cooling Action Plan has for the first time taken on board this big idea. And essentially putting the context saying that we expect the cooling demand to increase phenomenally 11 times between 2017 to 2038. And therefore, the IGAP is setting targets to at least 25 to 30% reduction in the overall cooling demand that we should be able to achieve while improving thermal comfort for all. And therefore, the idea of thermal comfort standard to reduce energy guzzling, lock-in of energy. So all of that, what we have inherited from the period pre-COVID. So therefore, when you look at some of the takeaway from that experience, and especially in the context of the affordable housing, which is the focus of this program today. So in that particular program, when you look at all these four verticals that PMAY has unfolded, the whole affordable housing in partnership with the private sector, beneficiary-led individual house construction, and the credit-linked subsidy scheme and institute development. Now, what do we see from there? So one, where we are today, just before the COVID, if you look at the data for November 2019, so that's what we found was very interesting, that of the total incentives given under that program, it is the individual house construction, the beneficiary-led individual house, that has taken up more than 63% of that incentive, which just shows that if people have the security of tenure and they have the piece of land, then the interest in building. And then The next, where you have seen the maximum incentive going, that is the affordable housing partnership with the private sector. Now, clearly, when you're looking at the housing for low-income groups, and that's where the maximum housing shortage is, and when you look at the data, official data that shows that is the 56% demand, which is in the EWS category, and 40% in the LIG. Now, when we move forward in that segment, now there are many aspects to the affordable housing. There's the whole issue of security of tenure, availability of services, facilities, infrastructure, affordability, habitability, accessibility, location, all of that needs to be addressed. But the point that we want to singularly focus on today is the whole idea of thermal comfort within that group of housing. So what is the takeaway from the pandemic now? Now, when we look at the pandemic and the whole so it has certainly reinforced the thermal comfort concerns. We are all home. And what we have understood, and this is something, a fascinating analysis that we published just a month ago, that looked at the real-time electricity demand in Delhi during the lockdown phases. And in that, we found that the overall electricity demand did drop during the hard lockdown, but it bounced back very quickly because the heat-trapping buildings kept the residential demand at the near normal level. And every degree rise in heat index led to 187 megawatt increase in electricity demand during the lockdown. It was 6% higher than the corresponding period in 2019. Nighttime peak, we have said that before, but every time we know that the nighttime peak has now begun to get higher than the daytime peak. But this time too, and keep in mind the lockdown meant for the first time, we have had a control situation for the residential demand because there was no demand from the commercial segment. So therefore, it's just the residential nighttime cooling demand. What you can see that with every degree change in daily mean heat index, it led to 25 megawatt change in average nighttime demand. So despite the work from home and economic slowdown, what we found fascinating again is the afternoon, the daytime peak had quite flattened, which also shows that perhaps people are more adaptive during day and have higher thermal resistance that we need to understand. And then the whole concern around the health, disease, and buildings that we want our housing to be livable, comfortable, and also disease-free. So how can you have ventilation and not be cooped up in air-conditioned comfort, but also let the virus thrive in that kind of a scenario? So just see what kind of dimensions have therefore got added to the whole idea of thermal comfort because of the pandemic. So if we have understood this, now what is fascinating that during this and responding to the migrant crisis, the ministry has responded to it with affordable rental housing scheme as the fifth vertical under PMOI. It acknowledged that COVID-19 and the reverse migration of workers, the compromised living conditions in slums, all of that has been, and that the need for dignified living. And therefore, this going forward, and we have to understand the implication of this. So, question that we are posing today, will COVID-19 pandemic slow down ICAP ambition? And therefore, if you look at India's, what the PMI data also shows, that India's residential sector is adding at least 178 million square meter residential space every year. And in the next few years, and if you look at the construction activity, how dramatically it dropped during the lockdown, and then what they're saying that there is going to be a recovery over 3 to 4 years, and then about 1.1 million dwelling units are expected to get added to the formal housing stock. Now, question is, are thermal comfort interventions going to get deferred, delayed while this construction happens? And this is important to answer because our earlier data has also shown that the importance of maintaining the building comfort at that in the particular sweet spot that you see in this graph. What shows very clearly that how that that in Delhi, that electricity consumption in summer starts to rise exponentially only after the daily heat index temperature crosses that 31 to 32 degree mark. Now, once that heat index is breached, impact of mechanical cooling shows up so noticeably. Now, therefore, how can we therefore maintain a comfort level? And therefore, that's some of the questions that we are trying to answer here. So how do we move forward with the agenda post-pandemic towards thermal comfort? Now, one big change that is already happening, and that's going to become absolutely a certain trend in the coming years. It is a material disruption in the market. We are not constructing buildings anymore. We are manufacturing buildings. So which means essentially, as you go to different states now, and our team has been traveling to all these states, looking at these different technologies, where you just precast and carve out, you pour concrete in these metal forms, and they are prefabricated, and very quickly you can build houses. So these are all precast concrete that you see across different states of India. This is Telangana. In Hyderabad, where you're beginning to see this monolithic concrete structure using aluminium formwork, very quickly constructed, even in Jaipur, Karnataka. So all of this. Now the question is, if this disruption is happening, and look at, and the question we are raising, if uninformed material transition happens, how will that affect thermal comfort? Are we then investing in thermally inefficient buildings? So the reason, now here's something that we really need to understand very clearly. This new technology that we have just mentioned, these are actually much more expensive than the simple conventional brickwork. So at one level, because of the affordability, the construction cost in states have been capped, but we are also pushing fast-track technology, and the industry is interested in picking up this expensive technology because they see advantage in saving time, labor cost, and linked loan interest. So the economics works out for them. But so if you look at, there's a huge difference in cost between the AC concrete block and a processed concrete wall panel. But when you are comparing the thermal transits, and you value that the monolithic concrete wall is 60% higher than the regular burnt clay brick wall. So it's certainly going to get more heat inside now without any corrective action on this. So the question here is that, so therefore to understand this, we did a reality check. We went to the states. We understood how thermal comfort of supported housing is deeply affected by layout, orientation, walling, clustering, daylighting, ventilation. Now, we went to these states, the team went to Telangana, for instance, and these are the specific locations where we went. So when we looked at for the compliance of the Eco Sanhita and the ECBCR essentially, what is fascinating, just to give you a very illustrative cases, that just the appropriate building orientation can substantially lower heat gain. So in one case, east-west facing facade had up to 17% extra heat gain compared to the same building facing north-south. Now, these are the design of the buildings that we picked up for simulation to demonstrate the change. The heat gain dropped by about 40% in the same building design when the material was changed from concrete block to fly ash brick, because that's what the Telangana government was using. But we need to assess a lot more than this. When we looked at the thermal comfort, and what is fascinating again here, in the same design, when we simulated for the AC block with 150 thickness, we got about 152 thermally comfortable hours a year. But the moment we changed that to 250 mm thickness AC block with proper window shading, then the thermally comfortable hours increased to 272 hours. Now, these are how we need to inform the choices of the material. And so combined impact of design and walling material can increase annual thermal comfort hours. So thermal massing properties, sequence of materials in the walling, all these require huge guidance and on design and material choice. Similarly, when we looked at the daylighting, so we found that the impact of the layout and the building clustering. So for instance, in L block ground floor, they achieve sufficient daylight only in 7% of the area, but the top floor has higher level. And the building clustering and distance between building and the layout plays such an important role in this. So therefore, are we being able to inform the design accordingly? That's the question that we are asking today, that how do we combine the material choice, informed material choice with design combination. Now, under PMAY, we are giving incentives, the fiscal incentives, and there's a central government incentive where you have given infrastructure status to affordable housing, central public enterprise giving priority to use of land for affordable housing, GST reduced from 8% to 1%. PMAY requires states to provide extra FAR, FSI, TDR. And the state governments has also come forward to give all of this and provide free sand, steel, and cement at subsidized rates. Question is, if we are not linking this, it's good that we're giving this incentive for the affordability of the housing. But if this is not linked to the thermal comfort requirement, then there are huge risks because states today are working with fixed layout, design, a template. They are just prioritizing material for fast-paced construction, not for thermal comfort. So if we have to inform this well, how do we move forward? Because the key question that we're raising today, that if we do not address this at the time of the construction, then we are downloading a burden of the energy inefficiency and thermal discomfort and higher costs to the beneficiary. And that should not happen in that kind of a scenario. So when we looked at the new rental housing that has come up and the whole RFPs are getting made right now. So what is interesting is that you do have a fiscal strategy for it. But very important point here is that for this particular vertical, additional technology innovation grant is being given for alternative technologies. And this is to be monitored by BMPTC. Now, which is fine. But if we are incentivizing material choice, then should we do that without also giving additional guidance on thermal comfort and design? And that's what we really need to understand today. So when you are today, when under the different programs, you have a lighthouse projects happening to demonstrate these new technologies, the precast technology, shear wall using tunnel formwork, external EPS, all of that in different parts of the country. Then how do we demonstrate this just not in terms of fast-paced construction is viability, but in terms of attaining thermal comfort? That's question. But very interestingly, when we look at the booklet of BMPTC of 2015 and then the second one of 2018, in the first one, thermal comfort was listed as part of the mandatory attribute of the material, because that's what BMPTC does. They do list out the priorities of the material attributes. But in the second booklet of 2018, thermal comfort has moved to preferential attribute. Now, we will certainly be discussing this later, but clearly, I mean, something that's so important that we feel, why would it move from mandatory to preferential? And that's something we really need to discuss. So here, again, the question that we are raising, and we do have Hatko here as well today, that how to finance thermal comfort using better material designs and walling technology. The reason we are asking this is that today, combined impact of material choices and architectural design solutions, if that's what we are trying to push, this can increase the incremental cost of the housing by 20 to 35% compared to conventional construction. Now, depending, of course, on the costs of construction and material penetration in states and the different local conditions. Now, therefore, if that is going to happen, then what kind of fiscal strategy should we adopt for that? Because here, at this moment, policies are talking about giving grant and support for adoption of the new material. But we are saying that if you combine the new material with design choices, then your incremental costs may be higher. And our incentives, therefore, designed to achieve that. That's the critical question that we are asking today. So for the next step, and the question that we're going to raise for the conversation today, that how do we guide the housing sector on alternative material and construction technologies at a time material has become so disruptive and we have to meet the ICAP standards and targets? How do we promote adaptive thermal comfort standards? And it's very interesting that we do have Mr. Raval today with us, who is actually doing the surveys today to understand the operational aspects of operational energy and thermal comfort. Now, we need strategies to minimize cost of improving thermal comfort and new construction technologies. Otherwise, beneficiaries will end up paying the operational cost. We have to shift policy focus from only constructing the housing stock to green performance and lowering operational costs and burden of the beneficiary. How do we improve the criteria for assessing affordability at the same time post-COVID, looking into the price-income ratio and everything else, and need instruments of accountability and a disclosure system? The fundamental question that we're raising today is, affordable housing needs to remain affordable for all, but at the same time, we have to ensure thermal comfort for all. And for that, we have to make design and material choices and the combination of it, again, affordable for all. Now, do we have a strategy for that or not? That is the singular question that we are raising today.
Thank you. Thank you, Anumita. Very clear, very comprehensive as always, and very clear that this is really the agenda for us. The twin objectives of affordability and thermal comfort. And how do we actually get that? I now have the privilege of asking Mr. Abhijat, who's a JS at the ministry. And as Anumita has already said, the ministry has actually put its foot forward and has put out very clearly that this is really its objective. So again, we look forward to hearing from you, Amritji, to find out how you see this agenda and how do you see it going forward. Thank you for agreeing to speak.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I am audible.
Yes,
and okay, great. It's really a privilege having to hear Sunita Narayanji and to see that you are actually taking the whole thing around on this topic today. I couldn't have been happier, really speaking, on something so relevant as enabling thermal comfort in mass housing, because we all know what the state of affairs are, and we've been reading, and we know your exemplary work in climate change and issues with regard to everything that has to do with environmental management. And Anumita has really done a fantastic job preparing for this seminar and this workshop. But what I'll try and do is that first of all, I'll just give a brief overview of where we stand, what we think we people are, what we have done, and then come to the policy domain of what needs, what we've done, what we are doing, and subsequently then move on to what ideas can we take from this meeting today, because every organization like this, because I can quite see that we are close to about 550 people now, and something will come out of it, new ideas, questions, and we will try and absorb them and put it in within the policy framework so that we learn from each other. So to begin with, I'll just go through the PMAY. When we started in 2015, we really didn't know that this scheme is going to touch so many of us here in India. And with an initial target of about 1.87 crores, the demand survey stabilized at about 1.12 crore. And as of today, we've done about 107 lakhs already, very close to the target. And this can be achieved anytime, but because of COVID, we've not been able to do meetings very often with the states. The total construction as of now is about 67 lakh houses being done, out of which about 37 lakhs is completed and delivered. So that's about it. The size of the scheme in terms of investments that the government of India has made is close to 80,000 crores, which has gone down already. We owe the state governments about 1.6, 1.8 lakh rupee over a period as they get completed in phases. Having said that, the state expenditure included and the expenditure of the beneficiaries would amount to about 6.5 lakh crore. So apart from the taking pride in the fact that we have been able to do this, one of the largest housing programs the world has ever seen, it also gives me an immense satisfaction that we have been able to turn the wheels of the economy in terms of providing employment, providing and asking and getting issues of cement and sand and hardware and plastics, and therefore the relevance of this thermal comfort is extremely important, because as we seek more and more material into these houses, we have to ensure that they are of a type and they are of a make which makes much more sense and complies to the green guidelines, whether it's GRU or whether the guidelines were issued by the CPWD. So this is also an appropriate time to discuss all this, because we have yet not crossed the river as yet, and almost like close to half the houses have to be built. And if there are any policy corrections, if there are certain more inducements that we can bring about systemic change, not only for the builders who are making it, but also for a large number of people who have to make within the beneficiary link category, where the people are encouraged to make houses on their own, I think we would have addressed a very important concern, because I hardly need to reiterate here at this kind of a platform that housing itself leads to a lot of contribution in terms of both pollution and thermal discomfort, if I'm to say, and to address also the issue of climate change. So coming to what we have been able to do both within PMAY and as a ministry, I won't be able to talk too much about what the ministry has done, but since I've been a part of this in a fairly long period now, I can say that the urban missions that we are running right now, I'll just come to the PMAY a little later. The metro projects, if it is conceived that metro is better than the conventional modes of transport, then I must say that metro probably around 2014-15 stood close to about 250 kilometers or something for the whole country. And right now, if I remember the figures right, the total metro linkage with where the work is going on, it stands at more than 800 kilometers or perhaps even 150, which means that more metro would mean lesser cars, lesser buses on the roads, which probably means more comfort of traveling in a this thing. But I really can't say much beyond that. Also, Amrut and Smart City. Smart City also has led to a great deal of smart solutions in terms of management of information, in terms of controlled CCTV cameras where pollution, where issues like garbage dumping are addressed very well. So I think smart cities do also lead to addressing the issue of thermal discomfort, as well as in the larger issue of climate change. Then we come to the Swachh Bharat mission, which has been one of the flagship programs of the government of India, where the issue of both climate change, environmental management have been addressed. Now coming to the PMAY, within the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we initially itself we came out with a technology submission in which we tried to promote new technologies as well as research on new technologies, including that of mass thermal comfort. Once this was done, IIT Roorkee took up over some projects in which they came about with examples where we could do planning for walling, for flooring, for fenestration, as well as in various other deployments of EPS monolith structures where energy could be saved. And IIT Kharagpur and a couple of other IITs were made as within the hub and spoke model for us to be suggested on the kinds of technologies that we undertook. However, this went about with some limited success, and we came to the era when we did a global housing technology challenge, because given the fact that the number of houses that we had to make and the kind of pace that was required to achieve this, also given the fact that there is land, there is political will, there is financing, but we need new technologies for two very important reasons: is to meet the pace of expectations, to be able to deliver it on time, and also the delays essentially mean more and more environmental issues, more money getting stuck up in the chain, and delays do not help us. Therefore, we thought of doing a global housing technology challenge, which was done in 2018, sometime in 3rd and 4th of March. And the Honorable Prime Minister did grace the occasion and spent a lot of time, where 55 technologies from all over the world were eventually selected on the basis of speed, scale, delivery, and of course the green guidelines and its ability to absorb to Indian conditions was a very, very important factor when these were selected. Out of this, we then divided the whole technology challenge about 6 categories, and there was a state challenge with regard to policy framework, that we encourage the states to adopt these projects, and 6 states, namely UP and Jharkhand and Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, and Tripura, they all came in to adopt one technology each, and these will now be taken up as lighthouse projects where new technologies which are completely green in terms of the indices that it have, in terms of energy that it saves, in terms of the material that is being used also is of a nature which will be very, very important in promoting the mass housing in a environmentally sustainable manner, and also ensuring that the thermal comfort is there, because we had this problem that new technologies tended to make certain houses warmer because of the use of material. So we weren't really sure whether, given the climatic issues of our country, suppose you have a house in Tamil Nadu or in Andhra Pradesh or even in the mainland North India, certain technologies may be very, very efficient for, say, for example, countries like Netherlands or Sweden, but will probably not be any good here because they tend to increase the temperature, or maybe there is a lot of, the quality of insulation is thinner, and it leads to certain discomfort, and there are other local issues involved. So we have selected these technologies on that front only, where these will be very relevant. These lighthouse projects, we have been named, we have named this as such because they will function as beacon, and they will initially begin with these technologies, and this will be later adopted by other people also. Another thing that we started was that we realized that only promoting the technology will not help. You need a vast number of people who are trained into using these technologies, who understand these technologies, because eventually it cannot be the builder who can get some technology just from abroad, because you need masons, you need architects, you need engineers who understand what they are doing, and whether mass thermal housing is, does actually go out as it is meant to be. Therefore, we started a course on vulnerability atlas and the seismicity and other aspects. And also, there's a course on which Shailesh Agrawal will be speaking in greater detail by the name of Navreet, where we fused all these 55 technologies in a very condensed form as a course material. And these will now be inaugurated in the month of October itself, because the whole course curriculum is ready, because the Honorable Prime Minister had desired that this be the construction technology year. And looking at that, these two interventions will help us a long way, because we've written to all the engineering students that both with regard to vulnerability, because we are a nation which has these issues of both seismicity, flooding, extreme heat, coastal areas and all that. Therefore, that is one requirement. And also to address heat and other issues of green technology, Navreet would be able to do this in a very big way. So this was another input insofar as technology and policy is concerned. I was quite happy to note that in Anumita's lecture, she had taken up the issue of technology innovation grant, because it is true that if these buildings are just made the way, they do come to be costlier at the moment on account of the fact that volumes will reduce the costing, and we do not have that kind of a volume, at least in single projects as yet. And therefore, such people, those who come forward and take the risk, and they are encouraged to adopt these new technologies, do need some kind of a policy push also in terms of financing. Therefore, we have developed this whole policy framework where we promote 10% to the overall cost, whether it is for the ARHCs or for the lighthouse projects. And we are also in the process of discussing this for the larger issue of slums also, because they need to be sustainable. Perhaps there is something that we may be thinking on those lines too. But this 10% pretty much offsets the extra cost that may be entailed, although we do feel that as volumes will increase, this will be taken care of. In ARHCs also, affordable rental housing complexes, we have clearly told that both FAR, FSI, TDR, and other concessions by the state government will be given, and room rents will be charged on commercial rate. But those are more programmatic details. I don't really think it really merges well with the issue of we are trying to address in thermal housing. But having said that, 10% technology grants will be applicable in the ARHCs also. Another issue that I wanted to take up from the policy framework point is that CPW pretty much is the legal authority to prescribe any building norm. And that way, the CPWD in the past 2 years have been taking massive strides in terms of assisting us in green technologies. And you'll be very happy to note that the bricks that they use now are compulsorily of fly ash or of AAC. They are lightweight bricks, and so that kind of a protocol of making bricks through old conventional technologies where large amounts of industrial and climatic waste was generated has been taken care of. And they did come out with a book also on sustainable practices of what green buildings are. And they are themselves now encouraging it in all their projects where Gruha guidelines and whatever has been prescribed by the various authorities which govern this space of green technology are being taken care of. And when we did this Global Housing Technology Challenge, out of the 55 that we selected, 34 technologies have been prescribed by the CPWD as the mother of agencies. Because if somebody has to make a house in Patiala or maybe anywhere in the country, Patna, they need to take this up in a manner that it prescribes to the CPWD norm. Otherwise, engineers find it really difficult to make a house which is otherwise not prescribed by CPWD. Another input that I wanted to give is that within the Affordable Housing Program, AHP, out of the about 24 lakh houses, a vast amount, about close to 14-15 lakh houses are being done with new technology. So clearly the landscape is changing. But as Anumita pointed out, and as definitely you would be really concerned, is that does more new technology necessarily mean more thermal comfort? I am not, very certain about it, because we will have to cross the river before we actually see how it's happening. But what Anumita said actually struck a chord, is that when we say that the guidelines of ARSC has been issued, we need to say this also, that thermal comfort has to be taken into account, and only then the TIG will be applicable. Because for a TIG, Technology Innovation Grant, to become more applicable and more acceptable, I think this insertion as one of the amended clauses probably only adds to our cause in a much better way. And the builders are in any case getting a technology. They might as well take a technology where thermal comfort is addressed. So that bit of 10-15 lakhs that we've done, and the ones that we are about to do, will also, and pretty much when the PMAY does something, it is also adopted by other state missions, other state programs, because willy-nilly there is this learning approach, and when the government of India takes up a program, they'll very much want to do it. So that's about it. One last intervention that I wanted to say, because I'm trying to see it as separate blocks all merging together. We just finished a meeting last week with the MNRE, the solar energy people, and you would be very happy to note that PMAY at the moment has about 11 lakh square meters of roof space available already. By another 1 year time of the buildings that we've already sanctioned, 34 lakh square meter would be available. We have entered into an agreement with them, and shortly perhaps maybe we will look at it as a program. This roof space we will make available to the MNRE, who through their own systems will take over these roofs and add and give some rent on behalf of the roof space to the people, those who stay there, in terms of street furnitures or in terms of the lighting that is required for public spaces. But this solar energy has a potential of close to 110 megawatts, which will be coming out of this in the 280 projects that we've already done. And there would be much more. So I see that there is a working in silos probably didn't help. And when ministries talk to each other, our roofs were of no use anyway, because there would be tanks and there would be dirt all around. Us giving them roof space, they encouraging solar technology, is adding to the purposes, and it addresses the larger issue of the waste not going there and solar energy being used in a big way. So that is another policy intervention that we are about to do. But all in all, I think the ministry, through its program under PMAY, has been really conscious about the fact that we needed to do this well and good. About the technology mission was there. We did give financial incentives. We've ensured that the new technologies happen. And what we've done actually is that we've told all the state governments that for PMAY, you shall have neutral tenders, because there was a predilection and there was a positive bias for old technologies. But now they say, okay, we will take up a new technology, and if it suits our requirement and the costing is there, because costing is a bit of an issue there, because generally they may go up about above 20% or around that cost, but more the volume, there is a cost reduction. And there are certain state governments which have done massive work, whether it's Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, but there are certain state governments which have not moved there. So that is another area where we have to work. And BMTPC is one organization which is working with the School of Planning and Architecture in training people also. So academically, financially, policy-wise, merging with other ministries are some of the initiatives that we have taken in PMAY to promote not only new technology, but also to address the issue of mass housing in from the thermal comfort point of view. But I am particularly excited that the issues that will be raised today will help us focus on issues that CSE brings about, because what you say will be taken seriously is something that I can really promise, and we'll certainly work on it. And now I'd like to hear other people also. Thank you very much.
No, I think really well put, and I think we are all, I mean, for this community of people, I'm sure I can speak for all of them. We are really with you on all these efforts that you're making, because I think the kind of challenges we have, which is affordability for large numbers of people, and yet bringing in them new technologies, and then adding to it the issue of thermal comfort and livability. I think, you know, if we can do this in India, we are really the model setters for the whole world, because everywhere in the world, we've had thermal comfort at a cost, and it has created divisions between the rich and the poor. So if we can actually think about it differently, and I really like the way you have put it, which is if you could build linkages and ask for thermal comfort, and thermal comfort, as Anumita said, doesn't have to be only about material. It will also be about design, and lower costs can come in. So I think that's what you'll hear from the rest. Let me now move to the panel. And Rajneesh, can I ask you for a short presentation on what you have found? And then I will then turn to all the other speakers.
Good evening to all, and thank you, Amritji. I think it is like what is coming out from your discussion, that yes, there are points which overlaps, and a lot of things will be in synergy with what are we looking at, what ministry is going to address in future. Now, actually looking at the title, which we have is Enabling Thermal Comfort in Mass Housing, there are three elements to it. I'll just explain in a reverse order of that, why mass housing, why thermal comfort, and how we'll enable that. So why mass housing, why we picked up mass housing as one of the area to intervene. Now, if you broadly look at the impact, for example, the kind of projects which we are looking at this stage, it's a huge amount of one particular decision, which actually talks about around 60,000 residents. So one decision going wrong on design or choice of material will actually impact 60,000 people who are living. Similarly, if I pick up another project from Jaipur, it is roughly around 12,000 residents who will be impacted with one decision, good or bad, whatever way it is. So the multiplier effect is very huge, because when we build up an individual house, there one person can go wrong. But here the thing is, like, we have to look at, that's why the sense of this to be enabled into our decision making needs much more importance. Now, as Anumita has already shown you this graph, so it's about the design and material. They are very interlinked with the demand and consumption, because when you do wrong design and wrong material, automatically the demand and consumption also goes up. For example, if we are giving 1.5 lakh or 2 lakh as an incentive to a kind of subsidy to the people to buy in these houses, but effectively if we choose wrong materials and wrong designs, that whatever subsidy which we have given will be immediately lost out into the demand of electricity as well as the consumption related. So that's why this value chain of framework becomes very important. It's not only us. Internationally, every country is looking into it, and you rightly put out, because there's a design and engineering, a lot of labor, profit, and other things which are associated. So it's not just one decision of housing; it's the complete market which is also moving along with the housing in this. And interesting part is, like, we are not talking about something thermal comfort which is very new right now. This is a document which is SP41, which we call it. It's even the IRC code, which has been referred in the BNTPC booklets, is somewhere around 76 or 80s kind of. So this document in any case is talking about a requirement which is now being staged properly, that this has become a need and requirement, because earlier maybe this and all these specifications are very well written and prescribed in this. We just need to get the endorsement of these into our build. Now, when it comes to the design, Anumita has already highlighted certain things. As you mentioned, CPWD is one of the very important institutions for us to take care. 2013 guidelines clearly say that you have to have a penetration of daylight into the houses. This should be the angle. But then when we assess the housing and simulated them, now when we look at independent building, 47% of the daylight area will be there. But when put in context with the site, immediately that drops down to 15. So it's almost like there's no natural light penetration. And Vastu क्या कहता है कि जहाँ sun गया ना उसके साथ wind भी जाता immediately. क्योंकि moment so in a thermal comfort there is a air changes rate according to which we simulate. So 2 to 10 is the good range which is there. So if we cross this range from below 2 or more, that means below 2 means there's no ventilation, and above 10 is almost like a windy condition. So when we looked out into any of these layouts, almost 60% of the areas clearly goes out. So that means enabling thermal comfort becomes one of the very important parameters. And because we have so much of parameter already written, so now how this needs to be enabled and very well linked with it. So then we started working on certain parameters for it. For example, there is a floor area according to which there will be a walling area exposed. So the relationship between these two, we try to work down to various projects. And this becomes very important for us to see that, because this actually allows a lot of heat to enter. So it's not only material, it's about the design factor. And I think Dr. Raval will place these two relationship very correctly. So I'm not getting into it, but he will definitely tell us that how these two makes a very good sense out of. Then other thing is, a lot of people say, yeah, orientation is good, but orientation of the walls becomes a very important factor, because we try to look at various relationship between whatever we are constructing and what is the impact which will be there on individual who will occupy that in future. And WHO, for example, has already come up with the guidelines, which is for healthy housing. And that guidelines it's almost like an appropriate for the context of post-COVID world, where we are right now. Temperature is one of the very important factor, because if the temperature goes up, the stress which will happen to the individual will automatically have an health impact in later. Now comes the third part, which is enabling of it. So how this PMAY logical framework will actually have an impact on complete housing sector. As sir has mentioned, that 50% we are going to yet to build, maybe the target which we have. So what we have looked at into the organogram. So what we need to now, maybe the suggestions comes from CSE, that what needs to be done. So for example, at the stage of SLSMC, we need to have a state level guidelines and toolkits. So for example, if you are giving out PPP models at this stage, under the toolkits, the standards and specification needs to have thermal comfort addressed under it. Because for example, right now under rental, we are giving 60,000 and 1 lakh, depending on what square meter, which is coming up, building up. Now in that particular area, if we are giving, so what is that standard or specification according to which somebody should deliver to? That becomes very, because if we just write sustainability or we just write about embodied energy, but we do not have a parameter associated with it, then we effectively will not get any correct answer from it. Then comes like, this is the second point which I was referring to. That's where develop the mandate criteria for thermal comfort. So we need to establish some elements, necessary element there, and then link it with the innovation grant with performance. Then comes the effective affordability index in terms of price to income ratio. Now, performance-oriented fiscal support in housing, we do not, as a country at this stage, we do not have a city-wise price to income ratios very well established. And even we looked into all the financial records which are being maintained by the financial institutions. They do not take care of the EWS and LIG at all. And that's the main sector which actually requires support. So there, and as you rightly mentioned, there are SPAs, there are IIT, there are NIIT, which needs to be, but they are more focused on to a very huge section of the formal housing. But there is another 63% of PMAYU section, which needs a lot of guidance from thermal comfort, because almost 63% of the people who are building or they are constructing, they are coming from this category. And that's where I think there's a support which miss to a great extent. And that's what comes as suggestions from us.
Good.
And I hand it over back to Sridhar.
Good, Rajneesh. Thank you. I mean, very clear. I think we are getting into now the detail in terms of what needs to be done. Shailesh ji, if I can bring you in here, you're the key person, and Anamita has raised some worrying questions, which I hope you will take up again.
Yes. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, I think, Sunita ji, we have deep regard for you because most of the time you raise very pertinent questions. See, I have been wondering, why all of a sudden thermal comfort is being talked about. Okay, so in fact, being a civil engineer, please listen my perspective. I will try to give you my perspective as regards, thermal comfort. And Arunimita, I mean, your team. I think JS sir was very rightly saying that we work in silos. When you are talking about a new technology, or you're talking about anything new, you should come to us and ask these kind of questions. I find some of the technologies are misspelled. Somewhere you have written novel, and you could have come to us at least to. So that is the problem, Sunita ji, because I know you always.
I mean, our rule is to go out and ask and check and travel.
Why I'm telling you, because Sunita ji, you always talk, the sense. So if you are presenting something and you're writing the name of the technology wrong, how will you understand that technology?
We'll make sure we correct all that.
Forgive me if I say something wrong, but I am giving you a civil engineer's perspective.
No, please.
Okay. So I think Amrit sir and our team has been working with great passion, let me tell you, ma'am. Yes. And the kind of achievements we have, we derive a lot of satisfaction with it. And as the JS was telling you, that in Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is not only about giving houses to the poor people. We are running a whole full-fledged technology submission into it. And you just read the objective of technology submission. It says that we want to promote clean technologies, energy efficient technologies, and and we mean it, because what has happened, ministry has given that work entirely to BMTPC, and BMTPC being technical partner and being a technical agency, we see to it, please believe me, we see to it that all the houses, are built as per the requirements given in various codes and all these things. And Sunita ji, you will agree with me, when I started my journey in 2008, there was no code for residential buildings. My secretary once asked me, there was a question from Parliament, and I was asked that please give us the code for residential buildings, which talks about energy efficiency. And to my surprise, now we have ECBC residential, but it was not there. So slowly we have progressed very well, and in my all lectures I always tell, please refer National Building Code 2016. It has a dedicated chapter on it is chapter 12, which talks about approach to sustainability, and it do talk about active and passive measures. It do talk about it does talk about envelopes, various kinds of materials, and various kind of things. Okay, so I mean, I just thought that I will intervene, and whatever speech I want to give, I just quickly tell you. I first of all, madam, I thank you, Sunita ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to speak on enabling thermal comfort in mass housing. As you know, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is running Housing for All mission, and sir has already explained, but just let me repeat it. Our aim is to provide Pakka house to the people belonging to EWS and LIG category. We have also included now MIG category through credit link subsidy scheme, including slum dwellers in urban areas by 2022. And all of us know 2022 is the year when nation completes 75 years of our independence. Housing for All mission is one of the biggest ever housing program taken in the world for urban areas. I think Amrit sir also talked about it. Just to give you numbers, because we a lot of pride is associated with this. 11.2 million, 1.12 crore was the validated demand which was given to us by the states, out of which 1.08 crore houses have already been sanctioned, and 67 lakh houses have already been grounded. Out of these 67 lakh houses, 38 lakh houses have already been completed and occupied. Now, I want to tell you here, I would like to give you another data which Rajesh was trying to give you. That was wrong. Out of this 10.8 million, 1.08 crore houses sanctioned, 60% houses are under beneficiary-led construction. Okay, Sunita ma'am, 60% means around 60 lakh houses are being built by beneficiaries themselves. That means grant is given directly to the beneficiary, and he or she builds his or her house at their own. So it is called owner-driven construction, you can say. We call it beneficiary-led construction. And so there are 67 out of 1 crore houses, 67 lakh houses around are being built by owners themselves. Now, look at my perspective, ma'am. If you see the construction practices being adopted for the construction of these houses across India, you will find that the construction practices are greatly influenced by local practices, local skills, local materials, and local climate. I come from north. If you talk about northern part of the India, most of these houses have 9-inch thick brick wall masonry construction, whereas in down south you will find stone masonry blocks, cement concrete, engineered cement concrete blocks. Nowadays they use AAC blocks. AAC block is another, I think Arunimita showed that slide. AAC block is also very effective as regards thermal efficiency. So what I'm trying to say as a civil engineer, the way we built it, the thermal comfort is built in. Then if you go to northeast, the thatch wall, adobe walls, bamboo-crete wall, or some type of houses are being built. As regards roof, most of the places, 4 to 5 inches cast in situ RCC slab or a filler slab is being used, or otherwise they have a sloping roof covered with earthen or mangalore tiles or local tiles. These houses are not only cost effective, but provide thermal comfort. So thermal comfort is seldom a problem in these houses. I also give you an example of Kerala type houses where they lay hollow brick wall with rat trap bond. It is called rat trap bond, and rat trap walling system is very effective for thermal and sound insulation. And in Kerala, they are also using filler slab for roofing. Filler slab is a method of construction of roof where bottom half of roof material, the bottom half of concrete is replaced either by brick or by hollow blocks or by even coconut shells or any or ordinary tiles or any other material. So 50% of concrete is replaced by any better insulated material. So you get a filler slab and you get a very thermally efficient house. So most of the construction under Housing for All program can be regarded as thermally efficient construction based on vernacular practices. But the problem comes when we go for multi-story houses. However, to safeguard against thermal comfort under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we have guidelines which stipulate use of National Building Code. We do recommend, model building bylaws. Our ministry has published model building bylaws, wherein we have, separate chapter on thermal, acoustics, ventilation, and those kind of things, and other prevailing local bylaws. This, to some extent, alleviate the problem of thermal efficiency, but not fully. I agree with you. But if the layout is not properly done and the dwelling unit plans are not well ventilated, and also the external wall is not thick enough, houses may have discomfort as regards temperature rise. So this is the reason that our Indian standards, they recommend minimum 200 mm thick external wall for buildings. Just to, incorporate that thermal comfort, the minimum thickness of wall, external wall, is 200 mm. Also, nowadays, use of fly ash bricks, AAC blocks, and CLC blocks help in thermal comfort. I would also like to reiterate here that most of the heat in house, because most of the time, because I am promoting new technologies, I am being confronted by a question that these houses are not thermally, comfortable. So let me also give you, as a civil engineer, another fact, that is, most of the heat in the house comes from the roof. So if 50% of the heat comes from the roof, and it is well documented, it is given in National Building Code also. So if the roof is well built with sufficient thickness of slab and later treated with waterproofing and insulation, the house becomes livable, if not thermally efficient. There are, BMTBC has been promoting alternate technologies, and I'm a big fan of those techniques. Coming from north, there are very good old techniques of mud fuska treatment. I think, Sunita ji, you know about it. The straw and the mud is mixed, and then you just lay over this, and then you lay brick beds over this, brick bed cover treatment. In north, this is used for thermal efficiency.
Shailesh, if I can ask you to, so essentially the point you're making, and I think we are all in agreement with that, is that there is a move towards thermal comfort. You're also saying very clearly to us that there are, however, determinants on the ground which could lead to poor implementation, whether it's the layout, whether it's the thickness of the wall, or even in terms of material choice. And I think that's really where we are all converging on, because our evaluation has come from where we have looked at those, simulated those buildings from ground. And I think we're all on the same page, therefore, to say what can we do further, because we have the same objectives. And I think that's where I think we should be very clear that we are on the same page. We want to make sure the implementation happens. And often in India, you know, the policy is perfect, but there's a lot of cost cutting that happens when it happens on the ground. So how can we tighten it? And I think that's what, if we can keep to that. Can I now, unless you have something to add, can I ask now, Rajan?
2-3 minutes. I need 2-3 minutes, because I need to talk on new technologies also.
Yeah.
And I'll just take 3 minutes. There are also number of government guidelines available, as I've been telling you about National Building Code. Then there are CPWD guidelines on sustainable habitat. There are, state bylaws, which talks about orientation directions, window specification, ventilators, and other active and passive measures for making house thermally efficient. If these guidelines are and practices are being followed religiously, the thermal comfort is achievable, in my opinion. BMTBC, being part of ministry, is also promoting new construction systems for mass housing. You all know, which invariably have variety of wall panel options. This is a misnomer that when we are talking about new technologies, we are saying they are not thermally efficient. We have. When I'm talking to you, I have 100 walling options which are far superior as compared to conventional walling and roofing systems with regard to requirement of thermal efficiency, acoustics, fire, water penetration. Not only about thermal, but they are far superior as regards sound insulation, fire penetration, water resistance, etc. Just to give you names of few, we have sandwich panels, we have insulated panels, we have puff panels, we have lightweight panels, we have lightweight concrete panels, we have expanded polystyrene. Its other name is thermocol. So thermocol of high density, it is called EPS. EPS panels, hollow panels. Also, variety of insulation boards are available for thermal efficiency and insulation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Also, somebody did talk about monolithic concrete construction. Primarily, when we are talking about offsite construction or manufacturing of building in a factory, we are talking about primarily a concrete construction. So let me also, dispel another doubt. When we talk about concrete construction and thin walls, people say they are not thermally comfortable. So let me give you another concept, which is called thermal mass. Okay, so the thermal mass means these concrete structures are having huge thermal mass in terms of concrete, which has the ability to store and absorb heat energy. In other words, lot of energy is required to change the temperature of concrete, which is a high density material. So this thermal mass provide kind of inertia against temperature fluctuation, and therefore help to keep home comfortable and cool. Now, at last, ma'am, I think sir talked about GSTC India, Global Housing Technology India. We are also under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. What we preach, we demonstrate in the field. So we are doing across India projects called demonstration housing projects. And when I'm talking to you, we have 8 demonstration housing projects being run in entire country. We have done a project with glass fiber reinforced gypsum wall panel system. We have done
There's somebody not on mute.
We have done a demonstration housing project with EPS panels. We have done with the light gauge steel with insulating panels. And in all these projects, and even in lighthouse projects, ma'am, what we have done is, as JS was telling you, these projects are going to be live laboratories. And in all these projects, and CSE is also more than welcome to come and associate with us. What we have done is, in all my projects of demonstration housing, we have employed IITs, SPAs, nearby IITs, SPAs, and NITs to understand the functional parameters.
Okay.
Being civil engineers, I am more, and myself being earthquake engineer, I am most of the time worried about safety, but about functionality of that house. We do employ set of architects, set of engineers, and set of people like you who study, and all those reports are available with us. So
we look forward to. So Shailesh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have lots of other speakers and I want to move to them. I think we've got the message clearly that we need to understand further And I will come back to it when we come up with the question answers.
Just last thing I want to say, that whenever we promote on the new technologies, what we are saying now, I will just read for you. House should be sustainable. It should be low carbon house, which is comfortable, livable, thermally efficient, and have minimum life cycle cost.
Okay.
So now the game changer is life cycle cost.
Objective wise, the best thing in life today is we are no longer fighting on the objectives.
Yes.
I think we only want to work together to make sure that the objectives are implemented on the ground. And that's where we need to share our experiences so that we can keep improving. I think that's where we are today. Rajan, can I bring you in now? I think we're all looking to hear from you on this issue of the challenge that we have in front of us, which is a unique challenge. Rajan, you're on mute. Just 1 minute. Hi. Yes.
Yeah, I think challenge is, I mean, you are saying it's a unique challenge, but it is very much created by myth around us.
Yes.
And the myth is also created by us only. When there could be ways by which somebody can put an argument and counter argument. And I also can put that, oh, glass is a wonderful material because it will get heated up very quickly and it'll cool down very quickly. That means that you should start using that in your house. Probably that's one way of putting it. And it's true that glass is such a material that it will get heated up quickly and will cool down very quickly. But does it mean that you start using it? Absolutely no. Not the time when you need to be in a building when it starts getting heated up, you are going to be inside the building. So many times the kind of intentions are getting thrown out. They are simply based on a myth which is prevailing around. And this myth is prevailing primarily because we have never invested in R&D in the past. Building R&D is nobody's business in this country in a manner. Hence, when we come up with a new scheme, when we come up with a new mission, when we come up with a new initiatives, we don't rely on something which has been fed through the research and development. And hence, we start saying that, oh, we are promoting certain kind of technology, which is absolutely sustainable, it's a green. But where is a number? Can somebody tell me through looking at the life cycle, this is a better, and can those numbers could be in public domain? Is it because I am saying would it be green, or because everybody is seeing that through the number, everybody is seeing a green? And that is where I think we stand right now, is that we absolutely rely on myths. Because somebody has stated, we believe that instead of looking at numbers. And that's where I stop right now, and probably I can take some more questions or comments. But I would say that we rely on myth, and based on that, we devised our planning and whatnot. Thanks.
Okay, Rajan, I think there's going to be a lot of questions to you, and I will come back to you. Mr. Hariharan, can I now bring you in on all these people?
Well, thank you.
Disruptive technologies, but disruptive technologies with data, and disruptive technologies which are both affordable and sustainable. I think that's the broad.
Sure. Well, let's define the challenge. There is so much said on the technical aspects of it, so I'm not going to, dwell on that part. We are 250 million families in the country. We have built all through the last 70 years, probably 40 million homes. And much of it has gone in the higher segments. Today, we know, I don't know how much of it is validated by data. India needs about 50 million homes for people with incomes of less than 2 lakhs. When I hear Dr. Shailesh speaking about how 60% of it is beneficiary-led housing, I am really heartened. I need to understand, and I will learn, I suppose, post this webinar, as to how that process is working, how much autonomy has been given to have these owners fulfill their aspirations and what they want to be built as homes with that 1.5 lakhs that the scheme is offering. My thing when it comes to technology is this: somewhere along the line with all these speakers, there seems to be some implied understanding that if you want to have thermal comfort or technologies that lead to such things, there is going to be higher cost. I will first very emphatically tell you that there cannot be any higher cost. You know, whether it's Dr. Shailesh, whether it's Amritji, they all talked about energy efficient buildings or green buildings or whatever they are. Effectively, today we know over the last, say, 10 years at least of accomplishment, both in the public and the private sector, that making a building energy efficient does not cost more. As a matter of fact, if it's an existing building and you're going for retrofit solutions, the ROI or the IRR can be as much as 20 to 24%, depending on what you're trying to do with the building costs of any existing building. So as far as thermal comfort alone,
we seem to have lost Mr. Hariharan. Maybe his light has gone. This technology challenge is more than the building challenge. Mitashi, while you're checking with him, I'm going to move to Mr. Nagaraj. And then as Mr. Hariharan rejoins, he can take off from where he left. So we don't lose any time. Thank you, Mitashi. Mr. Nagaraj, can I bring you in now? And then I will ask Mr. Hariharan to continue. I think his light must have gone. Oh, he's back. He's back. He's back.
Well, I'm back. I'm so sorry that I lost you there.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. I will only say this, that when it comes to the building block itself, today there are clearly demonstrated examples. I'm not even talking about incubating innovations, which make the cost as little or as much as what your regular solid concrete block is, with resource use being dropped by as much as 40% in the making of the block itself, in terms of whether it's M sand or aggregate and cement itself, or in the total consumption of the building in terms of its structural values. For instance, if there are the right blocks used, and I'm sure Dr. Shailesh will sort of validate this or testify to this, there are ways of reducing your steel component from 4.5 kg to as little as 1.5 kg per square foot. So, and these are not solutions that have not existed. I can also tell you that. My last words, since there is so much that has been said by the participants also in the Q&A as well as on the chat box, and these speakers have already, listed some wonderful things, including Amritji's set of listed, shall we say, tasks and directions that will need a lot of homework. I will only say this to you all. Finally, India cannot take to building such things if it is left in the hands of either the government or the private or the public sector and any such collaborated schemes. It has to be left to people with incremental housing options provided, where, for instance, you give me 1.5 lakhs, I have got 130 square feet land, let us say, that has been regularly regularized by the municipality or whatever in a slum. I decide to build with that 1.5 lakhs my first set of things at the base level. Then, as I secure incomes over the next 4 or 5 years, I do what I need to do to my house. You leave that to me. You leave it to me to see whether I create the design in a way that I want to do. And India has shown, barring the last, say, 50 years of aberrations, that it has known over 1,000 or 2,000 years how it can respond to these climatic changes so wisely and with such full of such insights, that all we need to remember, if you really want to arrogate to ourselves the ability or the power to build large, we have to only remember that we have to learn from such traditional knowledge and combine it with some cursory understanding of contemporary engineering. I will stop there for now. There's a great deal for the whole team at CSE.
No, I think that's a very exciting agenda, Mr. Hariharan, and I think the most exciting thing of the Government of India scheme is the whole issue of self-built housing, where people are given the right to build as they feel fit. And I think it's a very interesting area, which I believe we at CSE itself have not done enough justice to understand what's happening there and what is the knowledge of people that is being used there. Because I agree with you, that's a whole area, and the Government of India has actually been extraordinarily progressive in allowing people to build their own houses as a large. So we'll come back to that. Mr. Nagraj, can I now bring you in as one of the most important building agencies in the country?
Good afternoon to all. As we all know that Housing and Urban Development Corporation, HUDCO, is a 50 years old company working for especially housing and urban development sectors. So far, we have funded around, our today's balance sheet is around 78,000 crores, out of which 60% is gone to housing only. Out of that, 95% has gone to affordable housing sector. We call it as the economically weaker section or LIG categories. Let me also tell you, especially now recently we started funding affordable housing with special emphasis on green buildings, which is the part of the PMAY. Like one project which we have funded, greenhouses for EWS households in town panchayats of Tamil Nadu, where solar lighting has also been provided. Almost 420 crore rupees we have funded at a very, very competitive rate of interest.
Mr. Nagraj, just to interrupt you, the way we are looking at thermal comfort, and I think that's where I want to bring the whole group back to it. See, we know that you can have renewable energy to take off the pressure on the grid. But the first thing that we are talking about is how do you build right so that you reduce the energy demand, you increase the livability. And then as the JS said very, very well, that you would also have the use of solar to bring in an alternate energy source. So what we really require, Mr. Nagraj, for you to help us is how HUDCO is looking at the whole issue of thermal comfort in building design. That's the big issue for us today.
Sure. Like wherever we are financing, ma'am, especially for a government projects like a mass housing, we make it a point that like especially green building concept is that we will give an incentive also over and above our normal rate of interest. Like for instance, in couple of cases, we have funded these housing projects at 8.25. Wherever this kind of green buildings are there, we say that we will encourage for a 0.25% to 0.5% ranging depending upon the technologies they use. So we give a special incentive. Plus, in addition to that also, we also give a longer repayment so that more and more agencies will come forward to finance these kind of special projects. That is our main criteria. And we also insist that wherever there is possibility, they should use these technologies while finding it. So far, around 10,000 crores of worth projects for last 4-5 years we have funded through viability gap funding. So we have been insisting so that more and more funds housing takes place. As far as funding is concerned, madam, there is not dearth at all in India. Only thing is we need to go for innovative and new technologies. Financing will take care of the banks, financial institutions, NBFCs. That's what our experience, about 50 years experience.
Good. No, good. So let me open up this panel and let me bring in
Sunita. Before we do this, can we ask Rajan to reflect a little bit on this exercise that he's doing in profiling thermal comfort across different climatic zones in India? And how can that contribute towards thermal comfort standard or inform this conversation? Rajan, would you like to share? Yeah.
Anumita, I think, are you referring to thermal comfort standards for residences, or are you referring to the walling technologies work which we are doing?
We are looking at thermal comfort approaches. And in that, we feel that the work that you are doing currently, profiling the thermal comfort in different climatic zones, the survey that you are doing, that can go a long way to informing this whole exercise. I mean, we really have to broaden the whole idea and perspective. We are not keeping it only specific to only material here. Yeah. We want to have that framework in place.
Yeah, so there are two part of the work. One is where probably we are aware that National Building Code has thermal comfort equations by which you can define that if you are in various climate zone, what would be the comfort temperature band which you should achieve when you are designing a building. That particular work, when we did, it was based on a commercial buildings where we studied various buildings across the country over a period of reasonable amount of time. Taking that work forward, we are adopting similar kind of methodology to again understand that how and when people feel comfortable in their residences. And when we do this, Unlike commercial buildings, residencies are far more complex because it has a various economic strata, various sizes, and people also have a far more flexibility to achieve comfort because they have control over their clothing, they have control over their operation of the windows and ceiling fans and so on and so forth. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand that at what point in time, at what temperature range, at what relative humidity range, at what air velocity range, in various climates, people feel comfortable. And that will help us to understand that what is a difference between expectations and what is the difference between expectation and what they get, and where do we need to move forward from there. So that is the one part of the work. But simultaneously, there is another part of the work. It's the kind of technology which Dr. Shailesh Agrawal was mentioning. All of these technologies are getting tested in a laboratory conditions as well as in the field conditions to understand, do they have enough to meet our ECBCR numbers? The Econivas Samhita, which we call it ECBCR, has RETB values prescribed. And if you start using the technologies which are available in the market, whether in an industrially produced technology like what we have seen in a technology challenge, or even a vernacular technology like laterite blocks or Adobe or Mudfashka and so on and so forth, at what extent these technology can help us to reach near or can surpass the Econivas Samhita guidelines. That is the work where we are putting these two things together.
Fascinating. So do you have anything to share in terms of how we could move this agenda forward? I think what we are all struggling and we are all trying to do here is to say, okay, so we have these technologies and there is a whole mix of old technologies and new technologies, and we should be neutral to any one of those technologies. The question is, how can they be used in the mass housing projects that we have? And how can we make sure that those technologies have both affordability and thermal comfort? Right now, we're talking about those two elements. Obviously, you can add more elements to it.
So let me add, Sunita ji. So the work which we are doing are in a various phase. The first phase of the work, especially for the walling technologies, is in a public domain. We had a webinar, and the document and the values are very much in public domain. People can go to the website and get that report out, and can refer that if they use ABCD technology, what is the benefit of that. On thermal comfort side, we will be coming out by probably a December timeline that what is a residential thermal comfort model for India. So these are the sort of status of the work where we have. But one point which I want to emphasize is that generally when we start talking about policy intervention, when we talk about any of these missions, our focus is more or less goes towards the technology fix approach, where you say that, okay, you do whatever you want to do, but you use this technology and you will be fine enough. That's not the way thing happens. That's not the way thermal comfort can be achieved.
Exactly.
You did mention about design. Design is equally important. When our perspective is only towards technology, we need to put enough efforts to make sure that people also understands design very well. And once we do these two things, we need to go to the consumer and make them aware that what are the ways by which they can operate this building in a manner so that they can get a thermal comfort. Operation of anything is very important. When we buy any small machine, it does come with a manual. Now, we can't rely on people's common sense that no, wo to unko pata chalega na kab window kholna hai. No, that's not what happens. You need to tell people that these are the circumstances under if you open the windows, you are likely to get a thermal comfort, you are likely to avoid air conditioner usage and so on and so forth. So the behavioral change awareness is also very important when it comes to operation.
No, absolutely. So if I may bring this discussion to really where we are and ask all panelists to sort of add to it. You know, for me, the most striking issue that we are looking at today is really the rollout. I mean, I'm now not looking at the self-built housing model. I'm looking at the large constructions that are happening for affordable mass housing in the country. And it is massive. I mean, there is no doubt this is the world's largest program, and it is massive. And as Rajneesh very clearly put, and I thought very well put, the fact that a good decision can have magnifying impact and a bad decision can also have a magnifying impact. Now, Mr. Shailesh Agarwal has also very clearly said that, listen, we have looked at those technologies from a point of view of thermal comfort. Our guidance notes exist in terms of getting those projects at the mass scale, rolling out in a way that we can merge the two, which is affordability with thermal comfort. Yet when I go back to Anumita's one chart which she had, where she looked at both what is turning out to be the most preferred material and the layout designs that are turning up for the builders across the states that we have looked at, and maybe there will be other states and other experience, but the states we've looked at, we are finding that there what is happening is that the builders are basically choosing speed over comfort. And they're choosing speed even over cost, because that's really what is the driver of their economics. And therefore, they're going in for much more prefabricated material, which, and Mr. Agarwal, there's no problem. I mean, if concrete is what works, it's fine. But, you know, then when you look at it from a U-value perspective, you find, no, it's not working out, because either the thickness of the wall or the way they're building it or the layout. So I think what we are now at a stage, as I see it, and we're all on this together, is to say, well, see, this is where we are. We have the guidelines, we have the objective, we have a massive program. We also have some research, and I think Rajan's point on R&D is well taken. But Rajan, this is where we are going to depend on you, because your research is what is going to guide the decisions in terms of how to move forward. But the question now is how to upscale the implementation so that you can make sure that it has the integrity of thermal comfort and environmental sustainability. So in a sense, what you're doing is to take it out of an individual house, an individual guideline, to a mass scale. And that translation is often very difficult. And that's really where we are today. So how do we do that? How best, and what are the policy interventions that we feel could help us to do this and reach that? So the floor is open, and I'm looking forward to all the panelists to chip in on this. Shaileshji, can I draw you in first?
Okay. Ma'am, just to give you answer for that, let me also tell, because you have 300 registered participants here.
Shaileshji, a little louder.
Okay. Yeah. Now, am I audible?
Yes,
I just want to share with all of you that concrete technology has gone a way ahead. Just to share with
concrete और नॉन कंक्रीट के बीच में मैं नहीं फंसना।
मैं एक चीज बताना चाह रहा था, जस्ट एक चीज।
ये छोड़ ये इशू भी नहीं है हमारे लिए इशू है उसका परफॉर्मेंस। I think that's all we are looking at, and we are not looking at let's go beyond it. नहीं तो वो small versus big, concrete versus mud.
I just wanted to say that in nowadays in concrete we are mixing EPS beads, thermocol beads to make it thermally efficient. I just wanted to tell you that.
पर शैलेश जी नहीं हो रहा, ग्राउंड पे नहीं हो रहा।
In new technologies it is happening, ma'am. In new technologies
नहीं हो रहा है। ग्राउंड पे जो हमने देखा है वो projects are failing on all the parameters that you yourself have set. So I think we are now coming to the point of saying we are not quibbling about the need. We are quibbling about how to implement it. So that's really where we are. Anumita, would you say this is the right framing of the issue, or would you add to it?
No, absolutely. And I can see this inherent, there is this whole tension between what do you prescribe and what do you leave to creativity of the designers. That's always this inherent tension that I see in this. But as you said, that, at the end of the day, we are talking about mass housing. It is not about individual housing where an architect and a designer has a flexibility to work with whole range of variability and be creative about it. In a mass housing, therefore, what are those essentials that you still prescribe, you still mandate, that is going to ensure that there is an uptake of appropriate material with design? How do we bring that together? I think that's something in the ECBCR, you have given some idea. You're talking about daylighting, ventilation requirement. Maybe we can fix the orientation, but that's where we need the guidance. We want to know that if today the funding that is being given under technology innovation for affordable housing and rental or any other funding, then what are those essential parameters that we should list out and say that this has to guide the investment and design and technology choices? Now, it's a question I'm asking rather than giving an answer.
Yeah. And it's a tough question.
May I come? May I, if I?
Yes, please come in. I can't see you, which is why I'm.
Yeah, I've shut it down for.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Essentially, if you're asking for replicability and scale, the focus should be on the building block. If we were to specify, to state that we will only have cavity blocks even for external, with compaction strengths of 7 and above Newton, which is possible today, 1/2 of the challenge on structural values will drop. The second is on roofing. And what Dr. Shailesh has said is fine, and I don't want to add any more to that. We will have to work on that. The third last observation I want to make is this. Kerala showed it between 1995 and about 2015 with some very active work that they did. HUDCO was also part of that when V. Suresh was heading it. And, they all know it. My thing is that at every state, we have 600 districts. If we still talk about the top-down approach of doing big contracts, we will not hit even the 30% of the cities. We have to try and see how we go to such a Baker model, shall we say, or a Laurie Baker model, while this beneficiary-led approach has got to be strengthened with better protocols. I'll stop there.
No, I think that's a very good way of putting it, that how do you scale up in a way that it is replicable and it is robust enough for it to be implemented on the ground.
Am I audible? Come in here, Rajan. I think, Sunitaji, I think the ECBCR or Econivas Samhita does demonstrate how are we getting mature. We got a ECBC 2007 reasonably complex to implement, even to train people. We got ECBCR, which is it's basically a simple equation. Now, the problem is the implementation of it. And the implementation problem is also primarily because the society wants a silver bullet. Aap batao main kya karu, main kar deta hu, baat khatam ho gayi. That's not the way thing happens. Looking at context, you need to figure it out what is the appropriate solution for that. Now, that kind of diversity is what we are not seeking, or rather we are not ready to accept that diversity. And hence we are getting trapped into the silver bullet kind of situation, which is not helping us to implement anything what we want to implement.
Yeah. No, but which is why, Rajan, if I was to turn it around and say that, this discussion that you and we've had in the past, and we were to say, listen, we have a range of materials which you are analyzing, and you have already put the walling material out. You're looking at thermal comfort in residential housing, and that data will be out for people. Shailesh T has a range of building material which has also been evaluated and which is out there. What you're now looking at, how do you measure and clear the projects that are there for mass housing on a simple parameter of, let's say, thermal comfort, which will therefore have to be measured fairly simply in terms of some robust measure, which will be there in terms of either daylight lighting, in terms of U value. I mean, you have to, as engineers, as building, as architects, as planners, you have to help to give the right guidance for the final clearance. And I think that's really, to me, where mass housing will have to be measured differently from individual housing, which we can do with more complexity. Have I got that right?
I think Econiva Samhita is as simple as anything it can go.
Okay.
And it will tell you that you will achieve thermal comfort for X amount of time, and that's it. I mean, you cannot be more simpler than what RETV ENS is suggesting. If you start getting more simpler, then you might not get an objective also.
Okay. So if you were to apply it now to the mass housing buildings, how would they fare?
It's the simple tools are available. The way people calculate the quantities of the material, similar kind of tool is available online from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and other bilateral programs who are helping them. You simply use that, and if your RETV values meets the number, you're done. It's very simple.
No, that I know, Rajan. I'm sorry, I'm missing.
Okay.
Maybe for policy, how to use it to make sure that the kind of things that we are seeing on the ground do not happen. That's really where I am coming to.
I will add a little more to that,
Yes.
to what Rajan has said.
Yes, Mr. Haria.
Specify the percentage of openings to every building at the sill level and at the level above lintel. This can be specified easily enough. There are lots of experts there. There are masters who are present in this conversation too. Second, you ensure that for your thermal mass, you ensure that you go for cavity blocks and therefore drop structural values too. Your cost will also fall. And it will be natural resource effective too. I'll stop there.
Okay.
These two can be added into a tender.
Yeah.
We have added this in the state government here in Karnataka, and I don't see how it cannot be done as part of tender specs for even for departments to be executing.
Interesting. Now let's look at the Karnataka model from that point of view and see.
Sure. I can send you that. I will share with you, Anumita, and then you can take it forward.
Shailesh ji, you wanted to come in on that point?
Yeah, madam. As regards our projects, what we are doing is in lighthouse projects also we are making them, GRIHA and IGBC compliant. Okay, right from the very beginning, before the inception of the project, we are asking the contractor to be in touch with GRIHA and IGBC guideline, to be IGBC compliant, number one. Second, as Dr. Raval said, there are umpteen number of softwares now available, online softwares, and even BE, Terry, they are working. These softwares are available on the public domain, where holistically you can find the U values and all kinds of other stuff. But your point still remains unanswered, that what kind of policy intervention in terms of what should be the U value. Suppose you talk about earthquake, I will say zone 5. If you are in Delhi, you have to design for zone 4. Similarly, for mass housing project in Delhi, what should be the holistic U value? Those kind of things. And as Chandrasekhan ji said, something on openings and all those things. So you can start working on it. We can also help you out, and then we can, we can come out with the guidelines which specifically deal with thermal comfort. But again, I'm not getting into anything. I again want to tell you that it is not about only material, madam, or technology. It's about orientation, active and passive measures. Like
Absolutely. Okay. No, Shailesh ji, we are absolutely, this is what I love about the conversation we are having today. I don't think any one of us today is in the old mindset of saying, "Arey, building material decide kar lo, aur uske baad sab sahi ho jayega."
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All are on the same page. Dekhiye, building material is one part of it. Yes. It's a lot to do with layout. It's to do with ventilation. Then, as Rajan has said so clearly, it's about defining comfort. It's about deciding also how you will use that building so that you have maximum comfort. So there are a whole range of things that we have that we know. I mean, this conversation, and I want to bring in Anumita and Rajneesh.
Last point, may I add 1 minute? Now we are also trying to bring BIM. BIM is Building Information Modeling. It's a virtual platform. You create virtually your building on your computer. So BIM, slowly it has started coming into the Indian construction sector. Once BIM comes in, all these things will be solved right at the mouse of the click. So I think CPWD is trying to bring BIM, so that through BIM you can create a model and you can immediately find out the embodied energy, U values, temperature rise and those kind of things. So we are also trying to bring it in government projects. CPWD is working very hard on this aspect. So BIM will be an effective tool.
Please do the first thing, do it on NBCC projects. I think they're the worst. Okay. I think CPWD is better.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anumita and Rajneesh, how do you respond to this conversation, and how do you see us now learning from this to take our agenda forward?
So far on thermal
start
comfort,
with Rajneesh, Anumita? Yes.
Yeah. So far, I think the market economics has given room to the materials. Performance is not given. So somewhere this economics needs to be tied up with performance. Then only this whole thing will be solved. Otherwise, there's no possibility. Like even we set up a standard, we have EIA. A lot of people are asking, we have EIA, we have EC, environmental clearance coming for this. Every EIA, even in the absence of ECBCR, was asking you to ECBC commercial adherence, U values, and everything was taken care. Even on construction materials, a lot of things are defined there. So most of the project which we are talking about 20,000 square feet and above. So that means there is a structure, there is everything which exists for us to even we can tie this up the way we want to. But why it's not happening? Because there is somewhere there is economics which is not being tied up properly with the performance, and that's where the whole issue lies. And that's what the whole expectation is, that the government needs to bring this performance. And I think this rental model thing, which is now bringing the criteria that material ke liye we'll give the subsidy, but there will be some qualification of parameters to be performed. If that gets solved, and that's where it relates with the economics, the things will start shaping up automatically. Industry understand that language.
Interesting.
Mr. Rajneesh, if you don't mind my intervening on this one,
yes, no,
I would say if you did a pie of percentage of costs of many materials, you will find steel and concrete consumed straight away about 47-48%. And if you look closely at it, at your 50 or 55 rupees today per solid concrete block, that cost of the building block does not come to more than 2%, and is clearly allowing us room for technology, innovation, or whatever. All I'm saying is, even if you increase that cost, today you are building at about 800 rupees, you can build your shell, your cold shell. Any of these experts here can testify to this. The rest of it will be PHA and electrical, and therefore you come to about 1100 to 1200 rupees per square foot. You're talking mass housing. If you are talking of thermal comfort, increasing the cost and some 10%, as someone said earlier on, I would say no. We are talking of the shell, the cold shell, not being any more than with the building blocks, anything more than 450 rupees to 500 rupees is not on. And I can show you why it is not on. And many of the people here, including Amritji, will know about this. All I'm saying, therefore, is this: that building block cost, if you were to specify it in a way that even the PWD accepts this, which is to say that no, I will not accept anything but solid concrete blocks, is the way we have conventionally approached it. I'm saying, make the specification compaction strength over 72 kg per square centimeter, and you say, please use cavity blocks for external walls too. I don't want to claim too much time. This is definitely something that we can discuss offline too. Thank you.
Interesting. So you're really saying that's where the big game changer could be.
Absolutely. It's cost insensitive. It's about, application of common sense, not even innovation. I can tell you this, Sunita.
Anumita?
So very briefly, I mean, it's really not an easy issue to respond to, actually, now I realize. But still to say that, okay, the reality is that already a lot of fiscal support and also support in terms of extra build space, etc., are available now for the builders to do mass housing. Now, if that exists already, we certainly have an interest to see how do we link that support with real performance. But at the same time, we are concerned, and we don't know how to answer that how can you control something that you cannot measure? And we do not know what are those measurable parameters today. We are saying thermal comfort, we are still talking about, what range, what is it that we're trying to achieve in terms of how do you control it, how do you monitor it? But either in terms of that what is that those comfort conditions that you're trying to aspire, and therefore what are the other filter of interventions that are needed. Maybe we need to add some operational monitoring as well, starting from the disclosure to actually influence the behavior. And then therefore understanding the boundary conditions are necessary for any technological intervention. And then what we are finally saying is that therefore, how do we understand the benefits and define those parameters? So when we are doing funding, when we are doing building approval, then what are those essentials that we have to list out that becomes part of that approval process? For instance, for the mass housing, yes, we did mention about the openings, but should we also then fix the orientation of the mass housing to say that on the shortest day, that at least one part of the building, the house, dwelling unit gets solar access for at least 2 to 3 hours, and therefore fix a lot of stuff around that, the building layout. Because it's a question we are raising, because even now we are seeing that wherever you have a funding strategy, there is a prescription in terms of design that is that people can adopt. So there's something like a prefixed design that is being prescribed already. Now, so we don't know what are the risks there. So somewhere we have to demystify a lot of this and understand what kind of parameters should govern now the actual application implementation that is measurable and verifiable.
Anumita, sorry to be taking so much mic time. I will send you that pie chart in 4 sections. One is the financial cost, one is the percentage of financial cost of the total cost. The second is the carbon cost, interestingly, at the tonnage level and the percentage level. I will share this with you maybe by the morning tomorrow, and then you can see how you can discuss it with these leaders who are present here and who know how to possibly sequence it into their own decision-making frameworks. Yeah,
sure, absolutely.
So, I don't know how, I have an amazing number of questions. There are 97 questions and each one of them are really important. I would really suggest, Rajneesh, that you should take a look at these questions and see how can we respond to them, because a lot of them are very interesting questions which will help to guide us as well in how we move ahead. I'm sorry, I will not be able to go through these questions and you will have to forgive me for this. This forum of this Zoom platform is great for conversation, but it's very poor for interaction. So please forgive me on it. But I think very interesting questions that have been raised and we need to take them into account. But I think also, this conversation today will help CSE to redesign also its work in some senses. And I think I'm very grateful, Rajan, Mr. Agarwal, and Mr. Hariharan for your inputs, because these will help us, and of course, to the JS for his overview, because he's given us a guidance in terms of where we are. And as I see it, if I was to recap, I think the fact is that we are all, and I think we need to accept that after a long time, and it's often difficult to accept, that we are all on the same page when it comes to the objectives. That there is R&D happening as well. And I think, Mr. Agarwal, we will draw upon you to look at the data that you have in terms of building technologies, both in terms of thermal comfort and other factors that you have done. We have already done so, but we will do much more of that. We are obviously in touch with Rajan on the work that he is doing, but that data will help to guide us in terms of the menu of options that exist. There's also the macro level guidance that exists on which drives the objective for thermal comfort and sustainability. And I think that the Ministry of MoHUA has done very clearly and very well to drive that with the help of its technical wing that exists. I think where we are now talking about, and I think that's where we should really be looking at, is both what can be done better in terms of improving the performance on ground and how can it be measured. Because clearly what we are finding, and I think going back to that one chart that Anumita showed, what we are finding is that it is economics, but the economics is not necessarily only about the cost of building material. It is about the scale and the speed of construction, which is driving a lot of the mass housing projects that are there. Now, within that, how do you bring in the right guidance so that you can actually upscale a lot of what we know needs to be done, upscale it at the level it needs to be done. And for the millions of housing that are coming up, and for the scale and speed at which they are being built. And I would certainly argue, Anumita, that we should not try and make the measures very complicated and not try and drive in it many conditions.
Yeah.
That really, that whole experience, as Rajan so clearly said, the old ECBC approach to the new ECBC approach, which is don't complicate it, simplify it, make it a tool which people can use themselves, and you can measure it and you can implement it. And I think that's where then the last link comes. How do you make sure that the financial incentives that are being given are actually tied to those changes that can happen at the scale that needs to happen so that this can be monitored. And I think that's really where we are looking at it, because when I look at our own building and I look at the experience we've gone through at AATI, it's very clear that the building technologies exist. But when I look at how you want to scale it up, I mean, scaling up from a house to the AATI level itself took us so much effort. Now to do it at the mass housing level, where you're also trying to optimize on the land. I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, you know, let's make sure that you have sunlight and daylight everywhere. The builder is basically trying to make sure that you can build as optimally as possible. And that's where you get all your matchbox housings that are built. Now, given that, how do you make sure that you can account for thermal comfort, for ventilation, for lighting, for all the other things that will improve livability and improve the sustainability challenge? That's really where we are. So if we can sort of place it within that context and look at it. And I can see, Mitashi, some really interesting notes that people have talked. We have somebody from Nigeria who has put in a lot of information. I also saw there were people who have done research on looking at different parameters. And they have said that they have done the research and they can share those findings. So I see a lot of, I hope you're going to take notes of all this and you can download these question answer session that we have. And if you have the email of everyone, can you make sure that we can go back to many of the people so that we can keep this conversation going? And we need to figure out how to keep this conversation going, because I really feel bad I'm not doing justice to some of this. I mean, we have, you know, so Mitashi, please do that, because I'm feeling bad that we are not being able to respond to some really interesting issues that people are raising right now and the research that they have, which we could learn from. And I think first thing, Rajneesh, I would really argue is that let's put together just a good, you know, compendium of all the work that has been done on all this, you know, building material, U values, as well as measuring on ground what is happening on the projects. So fascinating discussion, and we haven't even begun to talk about the self-built housing, but fascinating discussion. I'm 15 minutes over time, but I hope you'll all forgive me for this, because it's been a really interesting session we've had. So thank you very much for joining, and thank you all the participants for staying with us and for staying and for raising issues. We will come back to you, we promise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.